Welcome to Behind the Sofa. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Behind the Sofa. My name's Ollie.
And I'm Kirsty.
And this week we are talking about George A Romero's Martin. It's a funny one. It's a funny name. Just Martin. It's just like...
Good old Martin.
Good old Martin. You know him from down the road. So, how you been?
I'm good. Do you want to do some quick updates first?
You can, if there's...
Yeah.
The fact that I don't know that there are any updates is a good sign. So yeah, go for it.
Well, there's not too many updates. You can still find us everywhere. So Instagram and Facebook at TV Party. Oh, TV Party. Oh my God, that's a flashback.
God.
Wow.
Wow, you're not even on the show. What are you
right?
saying, TV Party? Anyway, go on. TV Party, for anyone that doesn't know, is the name of the podcast that I'm currently doing with my good buds Sam and Charlie. But there you go. That's for another day.
Anyway, try that again. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Behind the Sofa Podcast. And by the time this comes out, we're actually recording on a slightly different day because it's going to be Ollie's birthday.
Ollie's big boy birthday. How old am
I? Far too old.
Oh. I see. Trade him in for a younger model.
No. So yeah, please come over and see us on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. Come and wish Ollie a happy birthday. Come and watch the episodes of Martin. And yeah, happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, all gifts, anything like that, it's all welcome. So, you know. Keep me sweet. I like peanut butter. I like chocolate. Whatever you think is right. I'm not going to tell you how to buy me gifts. But anyway, I think we should just crack straight on and talk about Martin because this is number 97 on our 98. I'm cocking it up, calling it TV Party, calling it Martin.
Sorry, guys.
It's number 98 on our list of our top 100 horror movies of all time. It's the first George Romero movie.
And the first George Romero-Tom Savini collaboration.
Ever.
And, and the first one on the list, I would need to check to see if it's ever.
I think it
is ever.
I think it is the first time that they worked together.
Yeah, and it's the first one on the list that we've come to that neither of us have seen before or even really heard of before, right?
No, I'd heard of it. I'd definitely heard of it. It was back in the day, oh my God, I can't even tell you how long I would spend scanning the horror movie sections of HMV and Virgin or Zavvi or wherever the hell, R Price,
Tower Records. Now you really are showing your age.
Sam Goody, all of those, and I would see it. And you know, back in the day, I felt like I would only go for things I'd heard of. So Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead. But
also,
I'd always seen it, and I'd always thought maybe one day when I'm recording a podcast with a.
But I mean, if you've seen the covers that we've been putting up, like we've been posting, there's a couple that are like sort of stylistic wording, like and things like that. But there's not really a huge amount that's like properly gore-filled or anything that would grab a young Ollie's horror lover eye.
The version that I always remember seeing on the shelves was just like a plain black. And then it just had red words Martin, and I feel like the T becomes a cross. Well, all T's become crosses, but you understand what I mean.
This one looks more like a cross.
Yeah, and it was that was all it was. So it was nothing. Maybe that kind of goes against it because spoilers.
We love the sweet artwork as well.
Well, yeah, but spoilers. I fucking love this movie, and I'm surprised that more people have not heard of it or seen it. And sometimes I do think it must just be down to things like the artwork, it doesn't immediately grab you, or you know, the trailer is not exactly the most interesting, all those kinds of things. I feel like definitely. They just, because the film is quality. So let's just go into it. So have you got a little synopsis for us?
I do. So it was originally like when we were looking it up to try and make sure we got all the facts straight, there was a little sort of discrepancies between which year it actually came out. Some places were saying 76, some 77, some 78. I think it was that it was shot in 1977 and it came out early 1978. So all the way through this, it's giving me stuff that I didn't even know that I wanted, which is just like sweet 70s interiors and clothing and all of that. So we'll get into that as well. But like, this is the first sort of 70s movie. The other ones we've done have been within the last like 15 years. So we're getting like classic 70s horror, which I'm loving. So,
I loved it because it had that kind of sweet 70s style. I think you got to think back to things like Mean Streets and Taxi Driver. They've got that real like 1970s stank on it, where you can smell the alleyways and the houses. And I was like, it's down and grimy. We've not seen anything like this so far, so that was cool.
Yeah, like Martin basically comes in. The first time that you see him, he's on a train, and he's coming. I think they mention it later on. He's coming from like Indianapolis, which I would need to do a bit of research to see what kind of place Indianapolis was, but we get the idea that it's like a little bit more quiet than where he's heading to. So he heads to Pittsburgh, and like a little suburb outside of Pittsburgh, which seems a bit grittier, a bit more city, a bit harder in areas.
Yeah, I think is it called Braddock?
Yeah.
Braddock, Pennsylvania.
So anyone listening from Braddock, Pennsylvania, please feel free to get in touch with us and let us know what
does your town have a vampire
like.
problem?
Yeah.
Can you relate?
Yeah. So Martin, it turns out, is actually going to He's going to go and stay with his granduncle, although he mentions that he's his cousin, which is a bit strange, but then might also add into like the story that they've got going on.
It's funny because when his granduncle first turns up, you would not be. You could be mistaken for saying that his granduncle is Colonel Sanders.
I literally wrote that down. I said that he looked like a cross between Colonel Sanders and like Richard Attenborough's character from Jurassic Park.
Yeah, he looks like a real like dandy Southern gentleman, but he does not sound like a. He sounds like the sort of person that a dandy Southern gentleman might discriminate against or call some sort of slur. But there you go.
So so he goes and meets him, and he's taken into his like granduncle's house, whose name is Kuda. Or Tata Kuda, which is grandfather in Lithuanian, apparently, because he is Lithuanian Catholic, and he takes him into his house, and it's instantly. Oh wait,
I was going to say, I feel like you
completely missed the main part on the train. I am so sorry. So going back onto the train before he meets Colonel Sanders on the train platform, we have Martin spots a woman getting onto the train. It's a sleeper, so they've all got their own little cabins on the train, and he sort of stalks her. He looks, you see him like clock which cabin number she's in or cabin letter, and then he sort of preps everything, doesn't he, for getting ready for his attack. So
he basically attacks her with a hypodermic needle full of some sort of sedative, and then proceeds to, I guess, rape her. No. Yeah. He mentions
that he was like not the sexy stuff. So
no.
A weird intimacy thing.
No, wrong.
Really?
100% wrong.
Okay.
He mentions that he doesn't do sexy stuff with people when they're awake.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes it even creepier.
Yeah, exactly. So he basically rapes this unconscious woman and then slices her wrist with a razor blade and drinks the blood. Many other things happen. He goes and stays at the house with Kuda and his cousin.
Yeah.
No, wait. Kuda is his cousin.
No,
despite
Kuda
the fact that
is his granduncle and his
he's his cousin because he says
Christina's grandfather.
No, it's his cousin because the whole thing is like Kuda owns this general store, and he's like, oh, my cousin's coming to work with me, and all the old ladies are like, oh, so another old guy's going to come work here, and he's like, no, he's young. He's a young guy.
Yeah,
that's true.
But then everything that I've been reading everywhere else is like refers to him as his granduncle. So it may be literally because, I mean, it mentions later on, you know, that like you're spending the entire movie trying to work out basically if Martin is like a psychopath and a killer, or and like clearly has something wrong with him, or if he's a vampire. So it could literally be he is my granduncle, but or he's actually my cousin because I am actually 84 years old and I'm not. Like
I feel like in most cases I feel like I'm right.
Such a check. Because it's your birthday weekend.
I'm just putting all my stock in the fact that it's birthday weekend.
Anyway, Martin's elderly relative that he goes and stays with, is that a good?
That's a good compromise.
Fine. He has all the beliefs from the old country, which I'm immediately loving. So basically he keeps mentioning the old country, so it's like Eastern European vampire lore. There's strings of garlic hanging off the doors. There's like crosses everywhere. He's very, very strong in his beliefs, and he honestly believes that Martin is a vampire and that there is like a family curse or a family shame, where there are people throughout the generations that have been cursed with this, and that they basically have to do what they can to try and wipe it out. And it's clear that, like, Martin, you know, we've already seen him attack someone, that he's clear that he has some problems, but the whole thing is them basically arguing over, like, what is actually happening here. So we're trying to work out throughout the film whether he is actually a vampire, whether he's just, you know, like your run-of-the-mill sex attacker, horrible person, or, you know, whether because of him being brought up in this world, in this family where there are people who have these beliefs, that there are like members of the family who are vampire killers, that it's just got so soaked into his brain that it's actually turned him that way. So
yeah, I think that let's get down to like what it is. It's basic for my mind. It's kind of like a meditation on the nature of evil. Ooh. So basically the whole thing is, as Kirsty said, is he a vampire, or is he kind of like a mixed up, troubled, and by mixed up and troubled I mean seriously fucked up and deranged kid with a lust for blood? And I think that's kind of like what the whole movie kind of is about. There's, straight off the bat, we said about the kind of grimy 70s-ness of it. There's, you know, I love those 3 original George Romero Dead movies, but immediately there's a bunch of stuff in there that I'm seeing in this movie where I think, oh, this is really cool. It's something that I've not really seen before in a George Romero movie. There's a really great bit at the beginning when he's attacking the woman in the train car, when it kind of switches to black and white, which I found really interesting. Basically, as he's about to break into this woman's sleeper cabin, it flashes into like this nice, grand, baroque, romantic vampire style. You know, the kind of Bram Stoker, and she's holding like a candelabra, and she's also like got her chemise unbuttoned and like beckoning him like Martin, like it's, you know, kind of like the normal like fantasy vampire. And then it cuts back to what you would consider to be what's really happening, and it's just like some dirty, grimy train in the 70s. And not only is the woman not there beckoning him to come in, she's also just flushing the toilet, and she's got a face mask on. Yep. And so it's kind of like the most unflattering kind of position that you could find. Just so, yeah, it's like, ooh, yes. But that kind of like flitting between the kind of fantasy and reality, I think, is something that's really, really interesting in this movie. I think the black and white is kind of really ambiguous. There's part of you that thinks, and it becomes kind of, they play it up more and more as the movie goes on. Is this his like flashback? Is he remembering things that happened to him back in the old country? You know, like I said, he thinks he's 84 years old. So is this stuff that happened to him 80 years ago back in the old country, or is this just kind of the inner work? Yeah, exactly. The fantastical inner workings of like a deranged lunatic's mind, kind of like trying to justify it to him or himself, or kind of paint what he's doing in a more romantic kind of light. I mean, it actually turns out that Romero wanted, like, sort of played with the idea of the whole film being in black and white, but the producers were like, we don't really want you to like experiment with this. So he sort of compromised by doing like the flashbacks and the sort of fantasy scenes and things like that in black and white, which gives so much more of like a stark, you know, this is the real stuff that's going on, and this is the stuff that is either going on in Martin's head or has happened in Martin's past, and it's just sort of flitting between the two of them, and you see it so much better later on. There's like the scenes with the police where you've got like the sort of real life police coming after Martin, and it's sort of interspersed with like the classic, you know, torch wielding, pitchfork outraged villagers like coming after the vampire from like the classic
classic novels and books and films. So that just worked really well for me. That was one of the bits that I really, really liked.
I was so in love, like, you know, we're skipping around and jumping back and forth, which is what we always kind of do. But that kind of like end sequence, that last kind of 10-15 minutes of the movie where it kind of breaks into like a final showdown or a set, like that finale set piece, I absolutely loved. It really did kind of like spin that romantic vision of the vampire completely on its head, whereas it was, you know, pitchfork wielding, torch wielding villagers. It just becomes like crackheads and gangsters and like
drug dealers, and
I loved it. But like I was saying before, stylistically, there's some really cool, interesting things. There's lots of weird lenses, I guess they use. Like there's some weird kind of like fisheye lens they use right at the start when Cuda is like bringing Martin to the house, which I was, you know,
I'd seen that.
It's kind of weird because there's like a shot where you can kind of see the outline of the frame, almost like it's like a proscenium kind of thing. But I wasn't 100% sure what you were trying to go for. It was definitely the most arty film of George Romero's that I've seen.
What's a proscenium? for all the non-film school people out there.
So proscenium is like what you would see if you go to the theatre. So it's kind of like the edge. It's kind of like the archway of the stage. So, and if anything you hear like proscenium, that's basically what it means.
Thank you.
I went to university.
You did. I really liked it. I mean, there's been a lot of this is sort of my, you know, my take on the whole vampires in media, so in films and books and things like that. I always find it really, really interesting because you know, the original vampire kind of thing was almost a commentary on like STDs and stuff like that. This is, you know, and then you've got like if you've read like the Del Toro Chuck Hogan trilogy of books, which is the Strain trilogy, which was made into a not very good TV show. Sorry for any fans out there, but they kind of went on it being like that vampirism is like a virus, so it's like spread between people almost like zombies. This is more like vampire as sexual predator, so there's no real like romanticism, there's no hypnotism, there's no seduction that you know from like the confidence of the vampires that you know from books and films. It's literally like an awkward kid. One of the first scenes where he cuts the woman's arm in the train carriage was actually a mistake, but they decided to keep it in, where he actually cut into the arm, like the fake arm, and he does it the first time and it doesn't go deep enough, and he does it the second time and that's enough for, you know, like for it to start to bleed. But they decided to keep it in because they were just like, he is literally an awkward kid, doesn't know what he's doing, but he just knows that he has to go and do this, you know. It's
interesting you said that, because I wrote down in my notes that I thought that was like a double take, like they shot the same thing twice, and it was almost like still leading into that expectation versus reality thing, where, you know, in the old movies or the book, it would be a tiny little nick, and then there would be no like real gore like spurting out everywhere. It would just be like a tiny little paper cut, and then they would just suck the blood from it. But then in the second take, it's like
gory mess.
Yeah, well, like pisses out. Or he almost like panicked, like at how much blood is coming out.
I literally wrote like red painty blood because was very red paint.
It's got that awesome Tom Savini, George Romero like poster paint, like remember when you were a kid, like a real thick like poster paint.
You
kind
can't
of style
see through
blood.
It at all. It's just literally red.
Yeah,
it's
I love
great.
it. But going back to what you were saying, like on the style of vampire, this is one where I almost like didn't know what it was, because which is not a bad thing. It's almost a good thing. I wrote, it's such an interesting original take on the vampire.
Yeah.
The only thing I could almost really compare it to is like Let the Right One In. Was like I'd literally never seen vampires treated in the way that they're being treated in this movie. I found it so interesting that kind of it almost made me think of like the serial killer arguments, where it's like, is it nature or nurture? So I think basically skipping towards the end, kind of you think to yourself, well, if he's a vampire and he's doing all these things because he's a vampire, it kind of gives him a bit of an out, and as a character that we can kind of sympathise with. Whereas if he's like a kid who's like this intruder, this like aggressive intruder, like a predator. Like you said, he like stalks his prey. Then all of a sudden, it completely changes the kind of your view of the character.
Yeah.
And to
it's
me,
like
that was
weirdly likable in a weird way. Like, not likable, like you wouldn't want to hang out with him, but you kind of you feel for him in a weird way, because it's like I said, I think it still harks back to, you know, he's been literally told this for his entire life by his like weird family, that they're all just like, you are like, you're evil, you're, you know, and you're traveling. And I think like his relative Tatakuda says to him at one point when he first comes into the house, he's just like, I am going to save your soul. So presumably exorcise him, as they, like, you know, showing the flashbacks of, you know, people flinging holy water on him and holding candles in the shape of a cross. And then he says, you know, I'm gonna do that for you, and then I'm going to destroy you. So it's almost like he has been sent on this trip to go and stay with his relatives, and you know, he's gone on that journey, been sent on it by his family, because he's a young guy. I'd say he's like early 20s, and it's like they've sent him to basically be like, this is your final journey. Like, you're going to go and stay with him, and then eventually we're going to exorcise you, and then we're going to kill you, and that's the end. That's what I took from it, anyway.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, like I said, even if you view it that way, it's that, like I said, that nurture part of the serial killer side. It's like, well, if you're telling this guy that he's no good and he's a murderer and that he's a deviant, then he's probably going to grow up to be a no good murderer who's a deviant.
One of the things that I thought was kind of weird, like I'd immediately written down that, because there's certain parts in like the first attack, I think in one of the other ones as well, where he actually after he's, you know, done what he's done, he's drugged them, he's done, you know, had his way with the woman and everything, and he's drunk their blood, he lays down with them and he puts their arm around them and everything, and it's like this weird intimate, you know, like he's imagining that they are together and everything. And I immediately wrote down like Jeffrey Dahmer, but this was like pre-Dahmer. This was pre-Night Stalker Richard Ramirez, who, you know, like broke into people's houses and like crept around at night and stuff. And I just got all of those feelings from it, but it was actually like pre those guys. So yeah, it was.
Let's just talk about those the death scenes, the murder scenes. I found them real disturbing. Yeah. I've got to say, there was in I guess all of them murders, there was some kind of like breaking and entering kind of aspect to it, and it was always really frenzied, but then they kind of juxtaposed that by the fact that Martin was like, oh, don't worry, you're just going to go to sleep, but everything he was doing was so violent and brutal. I found the scene where, so basically Kuda takes him into the house and he says, if people start going missing or they start being attacked around
don't go near the town.
Pittsburgh, then you know we're gonna have a problem. And for a while he kind of sticks to that, but then, as he says in a scene where he basically starts to talk to a radio DJ host on the phone, he starts saying, you know, that I start getting the shakes and I start to feel weak and I have to do something. So, you know, he gets these feelings and he decides to go out and attack this woman who he sees. But as he breaks into the house, he realizes that she has a lover with her.
And there's nakedness.
Yeah, so is this our first nakedness?
Yep. So
I was gonna give it some sort of award, but there you go. I feel like that would just be just crude.
It's pretty gross considering what
happens. It's not sexy.
It's not sexy.
So yeah, but that scene where he breaks into the house and has to fight off the lover and the woman is. Why are you laughing at lover?
No, it was like the big. Excuse me. It was the like big shirtless 70s dude wearing his like flared jeans and stuff, and he's like storming around the house looking for Martin, who's just like haplessly like. You
say haplessly. I feel like he showed like some, because at various points in the film, people basically accuse Martin of being like simple and an idiot. He does it really cleverly, and to the point where I think this is not Martin's first rodeo. He says to the DJ as he's talking to him, "Oh, I used to be bad at this, but as soon as I started to plan it out more and use the needles and the syringes and the drugs and stuff, I got much better at it, and I learned to come."
The DJ's like, "The drugs?
Yeah.
What?"
and he basically says, "I just got much better at it. I learned to hide my crimes so people would never know anything's gone on," which made me think that, which is kind of what was really chilling about it. That made me start to think, oh, he's not like a sparkly vampire. You know, maybe this guy is just a serious deranged nutbag.
Yeah, I mean, I did notice, I think one of the bits I noticed where he was saying, you know, about hiding his crimes and stuff. If you look at the train carriage one, he like moves around some pills out of a prescription bottle. He's cut the woman's arm with a razor blade and things like that. And literally, like, plans it out so it looks like it was a suicide or a suicide attempt, because we don't know her fate, basically, like whether she survived or not. So he is like cold calculating, but again, I don't think you hate him. You feel like he's just been like driven to this by like his crazy family. I honestly feel like they are like partly responsible, at least.
The thing is, in the moment of watching it, I definitely agree with you, but I feel like when you look back in a cold light of day, that it definitely starts to become
he's got mental
problems.
Problems.
You definitely start to shift a lot more blame onto him. I think part of that is to do with the actor, whose name is John Amplas.
John Amplas ended up what they were originally going to do when Romero wrote this was he wrote it that it was going to be an older vampire who was struggling to sort of fit in and survive in like a modern world. So they'd been around for a long time and they were finding it hard to, you know, get on with what they were doing. But he saw John Amplas perform somewhere, or maybe audition, I'm not sure, and was so taken with him, it was just like, this is great. So they actually rewrote it for him as a younger vampire who was just trying to find his way in the world, essentially. But he ended up being in like Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Creepshow, Night Riders, and things like that. The thing is, he ended up being a lot of Romero's.
I've seen a bunch of those movies, and I just do not remember him in them. So
he's like a doctor in one of them, so he's not like one of the major people. He probably would have had maybe like a couple of lines, but we'll keep an eye out with them because we have got Dawn and Day on the list.
And also, I feel like it kind of adds to the believability of it, because if it was like, and Brad Pitt, or you know, not even Brad Pitt, you know, because you know he's like a leading man. But if it was like William H. Macy then you think, well, I know that's William H. Macy. The fact that you don't know this guy, like you've never seen him in anything before, it kind of makes him. There's something slightly off kilter about him. He has this really good knack of, like Kirsty said, like balancing that sympathetic and also really chilling. There's something about his face which is really kind of like treads the line between being really horrifying and like, oh, he's just a normal guy that you would totally ignore if you saw on the street.
He doesn't have that, like, there's no point in this film where you see him do that evil stare or the cold killer stare. He's got like a goofy kind of face, and the bit where I was saying about him being like sort of hapless or whatever is like, if you watch him while he's running throughout any of it, like, we're conditioned to know that like vampires and things, like when you think of the classic vampire, is they are, you know, really composed unless they're killing or feeding or whatever, but they are like fully confident in what they're doing. They would never trip and stumble or something like that, you know. They're like fully composed, whereas Martin, like, he's literally, when he runs or, you know, when he's like moving around or whatever, he's just literally like arms and legs. He's like a goofy kid who hasn't quite grown into his body yet, and that's where I got that from. Like, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's not fantastic at it. He just sort of like, I just have visions of him, you know, sort of like flapping around, and like when he's running, he like slams into walls and stuff like that in houses when he's like trying to run away, and he's just not quite got that composure that you imagine if you were like, this guy's a vampire. You're like, really? Is he?
One thing I just thinking back on something you just said about how he never has the evil look or does He doesn't look, you know, like Willem Dafoe is in that movie where he plays Nosferatu, where basically it's like, if you were to think of a real life, like, this guy looks like a vampire, you would think of someone like...
I would think Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, like Willem Dafoe or someone
just
like
angular.
This guy does not look like that, but there is a great scene where Cuda basically invites this old-timey priest round to perform an exorcism on Martin, and Martin's having none of it. He kind of gets bored of it and just like busts out of the room. But then, like in a little sequence after that, Cuda like goes out onto the streets of Braddock, and they really paint it up and make it seem like it's a real classic, like Hammer horror style.
Like
the
fog machine.
The fog machine budget must have been at, this is the day, guys. The 10 we've cleared Pennsylvania out of all of its fog machines, and they're all on for this one day. But basically, it's Cuda kind of like wandering the streets, and there's shadows and
kids'
fog.
playground.
Yeah, like
it's all creepy.
like an old creepy chime song goes. You know what I mean? There's all that kind of real standard stuff. And then he sees Martin, and Martin is wearing like a cape, and he's got some kind of like he looks much paler than normal, and he's got fangs. So at some point you think, oh my god, was it all true? Is Martin actually a vampire? But then as soon as you see him closer up, you realise that he's just fucking with Cuda, and he's basically saying, look how stupid the thing that you believe really is. Look how crazy and daft and ridiculous I look in this outfit. And then he just starts laughing at him, basically, which I thought was a really great, effective scene.
Yeah, throughout the whole thing, he is basically saying, like, he like Martin refers to it as the magic, like this whole belief from the old country and the belief in vampires and things like that. He refers to it as the magic, and he always says the magic isn't real, the magic doesn't exist. He's not saying that vampires don't exist, it's just they don't exist in the way that Cuda thinks they do. So he's like, all of this stuff, and he speaks to the radio DJ about it later on as well. He's just like, all the ladies, that's not true, that doesn't happen. And it's like, well, maybe it doesn't happen to you.
I wish it was true.
Yeah, but like, he talks about garlic and, you know, crosses and holy water and exorcisms and all that kind of stuff, and he's like, none of this stuff works. But he never says that vampires aren't real. So we think that, you know, he's got this belief that he is actually a vampire. He is, you know, like, he believes he's 84 years old. That never really gets answered. Again, I think that that whole, you know, cousin, granduncle type thing makes me think that, you know, there is, that he could definitely be 84 years old. It kind of gets left unanswered. But, you know, he never, if anyone said to him, you know, like, are vampires real? He never actually, you know, there's no actual real answer from him.
I feel like in his mind he thinks it's true, but as a viewer, did you think it was real? Like, did you think he is a vampire, or did you think no?
I don't know. I mean, like, I went back and forth. I don't know if you did, like, whether it was just gonna be like a little twist at the end or what. But I mean, I know that he definitely has. I mean, not just from the attack and everything else, because we haven't actually mentioned yet that, like, he has an affair after he has all these sort of intimacy things, you know, like, he's got those issues. He refers to it as the sexy stuff, like, he's just really awkward. He begins, like, an affair with a woman who is, like, unhappy, like, bored housewife, unhappy in her marriage, begins a relationship, and she is saying to him all the things that the women in the black and white fantasies would be saying to him. You know, she's just like, at one point she says, without knowing really what he does, she was just like, you know, she really loves the fact that he is so gentle and he's so patient, and she's like, I wish you could shoot me up with drugs and make me feel like that. And it's like,
well, I think
so,
it's even better than that. Doesn't she say, I wish I had what you had?
Yeah.
And he's like, and he
like,
says,
I wish it was catching.
I wish it was catching. And he says, well, some people say it is. And then they start making out. But then I was like, oh, I love that part.
But she felt like so much guilt at their affair and everything. And, like, you know, just generally, obviously, like, just depressed at her life. And she ends up, like, he goes to her house later on, and he walks into her house, is calling for her, walks into the bathroom and finds that she's actually killed herself. And he's just,
with a razor blade as well.
And he's just standing in the doorway of the bathroom, no emotion whatsoever, which again, you know, like it could go either way. Like, you know, vampires obviously don't really care about people dying, but like psychopaths, sociopaths, people with like no empathy whatsoever would also not give a shit if they were just like, oh, okay, it's just a dead person there. So it could be either way. But then he speaks to the radio DJ about it and says, you know, like he didn't really care. He was just like, oh, sorry that happened, you know, but it wasn't me. But Kuda does not believe that.
So okay, so if you think back to last week, fair listeners, we reviewed The Mist, which when you read about online, it has maybe one of the most shocking gut punch endings of all time in a horror movie. And then we watch Martin this week, which 100% just says, oh, The Mist, shocking ending, hold my beer.
Yeah.
I did not see this coming.
No.
And when it happened, I was gobsmacked.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
The one thing, unfortunately, it did make me think of was that scene in Bart Simpson's Dracula when Homer shoves the stake into Mr. Burns and he says, die you foul fiend, and starts hammering it in, and then Lisa said, Dad, that's his crotch. And because when he shoves it in, I was like, that's not where your heart is. It was like real low. It was like real low.
So anyway, Kuda basically doesn't...
Sorry to ruin the...
Yeah, sorry.
ruin the...
Sorry. But you
the
shouldn't
tension.
really be watching this, listening to this if you haven't watched it.
I wasn't worried about spoiling it. I feel like if you're listening to this, you should always watch the movie first. But I was more worried about kind of pointing out to everyone that's not where your heart is.
But yeah, true. But Kuda didn't believe the suicide angle. You know, obviously she'd been found and it had been reported in the local news. He was just like, immediately, this was Martin. So he comes into the room where Martin is sleeping and he starts chatting to him about, you know, did you really think that I was going to believe that wasn't you? Everything else. I had the visions of it being like he gets dragged into the other room. They've got everyone from their congregation, their small congregation of their church is there. They're all like holding crosses and throwing holy water at him and everything. And that it would be closer to the flashbacks that we'd seen previously, that maybe that was him seeing what his fate was going to be, and that there was going to be people there with candles and garlic and everything else. But he literally just comes in and goes, I gave you a chance, now that's it, basically. Rolls him over and hammers a stake through him. And it is brutal, but so
it's
good.
real good. It's kind of unlike a lot of Tom Savini special effects. It doesn't look as like fantastical.
No,
it looks a little bit more
practical, isn't it? In a weird way.
But it looks kind of more realistic. It doesn't look like that real cartoony Tom Savini violence that sometimes you're used to. And like I said, I wonder if it's just because it's not him trying to say, look how fucked up and gross I can make this look. Isn't this fun? It's probably happening to some you know, some side character like the guy in Dawn of the Dead who gets his arms ripped off and all those kinds of things. When it's the main character who you've been kind of having these mixed feelings about, whether you feel sympathy for them or whether you think they're a horrific monster, and then he just gets a stake hammered through his chest, and it's not like he bursts into flames or he turns into dust. He literally just starts bleeding out and dies. And then they have this real super downbeat ending where they play the radio DJ who Martin's been speaking to the whole time, calls him the Count, and basically for him, Martin has been like ratings blockbuster, so he's like bought loads of new listeners and everyone loves it. And then when he's not been phoning in for a while, everyone's like, where's the Count, where's the Count, where's the Count? And basically there's like a montage of all these people phoning up with their theories on what's happened to him, but it's all interspersed over Kuda basically burying Martin in the back garden, like you know what I mean, with a crucifix on top, and then throwing grass seed on top. So it's like, well, that's the end of that.
Yeah,
it's a real dark downbeat ending.
But it just made me think, like, he's got that little plot of land. Is this the first person? Because he mentions the family previously, like he's got like a photo album with all these pictures of like old black and white and sepia pictures of like family, where he's explaining like the curse and the family shame and how we're trying to get rid of it and everything. So I was immediately thinking, like, is this little plot of land, like, is Martin the newest in a long line of people from their family who have been sent out to Braddock, Pennsylvania, and are buried in that plot of land?
I think it is. I think it's the first one. I feel. Did I not hear that the only reason that he went out there was because the people that were looking after him previously had died?
I don't know.
I think that's what I read. And
they don't place a lot of interest on, not interest, but a lot of impact on that. So, like I said, I read it as he got sent out there, and the reason he got sent out there was because he is a vampire. But it's in a similar vein to, you know, there's a problem child, and like the people who were looking after him previously in like, it could be in any film, there's a problem child in the family and there's no one to look after him, everyone's at their wits' end, and so they just send them off to, you know, some other town somewhere and put him to work and all of that. So it could have been that, or it could have literally been, like I said, everyone else in the family, apart from Christina, the cousin who lives in the house, that everyone else in the family is as like hell-bent on, this is, you know, this is our family curse and we have to try and protect our family. So it's interesting.
Just before we start wrapping up the review part of it, I just want to mention a couple of things. First of all, soundtrack. Oof, loved it. So cool. I loved that kind of like... so when you think of like synthy horror movie soundtracks, don't think of like the 80s style. Like this is a super 70s style synth horror soundtrack. Think of like some of the weirder bits of music they have in Dawn of the Dead. Because originally I was like, oh, Goblin, but it's not Goblin.
It's not Goblin, but they did do Dario Argento put out a version of Martin, which he called Vampire, which we love.
Cool, love it.
And he actually redid the soundtrack, and it's all Goblin.
Oh my god, I would love to
So we have to try and find it.
Yeah, we'll try and find some clips of that and put it up online, because I know there's Goblin fans out there.
Is so good.
But yeah, love that soundtrack. Love the cinematography of it as well. Like I said, it had that real kind of like down, gritty Taxi Driver, like cinema verite style of cinematography.
There were a few Taxi Driver-esque bits. There's one bit where like he's obviously trying to work out. He's still trying to find. It's this whole. He's still trying to find his way into being, you know, like a normal functioning member of society. So he decides to go to like a sex shop and like look at all the erotica and the books and the people that are in that kind of thing.
I want to buy that weird bed thing that he has. It's like a weird like car, like a bed car, and when you move it along, like the people under the covers start like night swimming. It was like it was
sofa wrestling.
I was like, oh, that's awesome.
That's really weird.
I want that. But that's a birthday present idea if anyone out there is
no, we're good. Unless it's got screen time. Unless
like a
it's
screen
actually
use
got
prop.
Screen use, that would be great. But
I wonder if that thing exists anywhere.
Let's try and find it.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
But yeah, during that bit, there's like, it's very Taxi Driver-esque.
Oh, yeah,
there's like
definitely.
the saxophone sleazy kind of sound. And so like it works really well. I'm trying to remember whether they did actually. I think they didn't, which made it even more intense. The final staking scene, Martin's death scene, I don't remember there being any music.
No, I think they just kind of let it lay there cold.
Yeah, which makes it even more intense for me.
I guess.
I think it makes it more intense for me. Like when they do that, because if you've just got like real like incidental like music over the back, it can detract from it a little bit sometimes. But if you just leave it like it's literally you are in the room with them, because there wouldn't have been any incidental music on in the background, or if you just had like a little radio playing a completely like unrelated music, or the DJ asking for the count like in the background, that's the only way that it would have been better.
Let's have a final opinion. Did you like this movie? I think the answer is pretty obvious.
Really like this movie. I wouldn't say it shit me up. I really liked it. No, I mean, not in a like it's not good, but it's not terrifying. It's more just disturbing. So to shit me up, I mean, it would give me like fear, but I think it's just it's a disturbing film. Definitely worth a watch. please, like let people know about it, because I think it's just like there's a lot of people that have no idea that this film exists.
I think when you say George Romero, a lot of people will know Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, but this film, apparently it was his favourite of all the films he made as well, which I find really interesting, because I can kind of see it, because it's quite a kind of intimate, personal film, so I can 100% see why it would be his favourite. Did it shit me up? I don't know if it shit me up. It definitely disturbed. Like I said, those murder scenes were really disturbing.
Yep.
It didn't scare me, but I love this movie. Love this movie. It slots into that 70s time when I feel like my favourite movies were coming out.
We have a lot of 70s on the list, so I'm quite excited about all the rest of them as well. So,
but even not even just horror. Like, I know I've said Taxi Driver like 50 times already, but movies of that kind of era and ilk, I feel like there was so much like daring stuff going on, and people were trying new different things. So yeah, for me, I give this 10 thumbs up. Did it shit me up? No, but it's definitely a disturbing piece. I just want to read this one little quote that I've got from George Romero here that he gave about Martin. He said, "Martin is designed that all those supernatural monsters that are part of our literary tradition are, in essence, expurgations of ourselves. They are beasts we've created in order to exercise this monster from within us. I tried to show Martin that you can't just slice off this evil part of ourselves and throw it away. It's a permanent part of ourselves, and we'd better try and understand it." Which I feel like is very good sum up of what's going on. It's basically, the evil within us all. Is it something that's kind of born from some magical origin that we can kind of try and cure and get rid of, or is it something that's kind of like deeply ingrained within us all? But yeah, I love this movie, and I hope that there's a lot. Let's just say now we're a couple down the list as well. 98 on the list.
It's definitely, for me, it's ahead. We've already said that The Mist is going to be 100 in our estimations
so far.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'd put it ahead of the movies that we've done so far.
Yeah,
whether it moves further up than like the ones we've got next week, which I'll let you know what we are going to be watching next time shortly. But that's another movie that we haven't seen, so we're going into it pretty blind, which I'm looking forward to.
I enjoyed it a lot more than I enjoyed The Mist, and I definitely enjoyed it more than I enjoyed The Babadook, which is not to say those movies aren't good. I thought they were both also great.
It's
but
just
this
slightly
one,
less depressing than...
I don't know. Is it less depressing?
I mean...
I feel like it's got such a downbeat ending, and the whole thing is they deal with isolation so much, like how Martin's like this total outcast. Like, I was thoroughly depressed on my birthday weekend. So
sorry, but I mean, all of the movies that we've done so far all deal with like outcasts and outsiders and us versus them, and like not being understood.
Maybe then it is literally just the style of it, because those other movies are newer, they've got better lighting, they've got more attractive actors in them. You know what I mean? Like, I can't smell what's happening through the screen like I can when I watch Martin.
We'll compare it to some of the other 70s, I think. 70s are
definitely.
The other Romeros and stuff. But, I mean, I love the fact that he said that it was one of his personal favourites, and I would need to check up on, like, some of his other films. But, I mean, it's not massively high budget.
So apparently the budget they had listed on their thing is like $250,000, but even then the producer said we only really made it for $100,000, and the only reason we said we made it for $250,000 was so that the next time we applied for budget that they would give us more. Yep. I was like, brilliant! What a genius idea!
Yeah, I mean, like the police in the police in the shootout scene were actual policemen. Again, like it might be it might be one of the reasons why it's his personal favorite. It might also be one of the reasons why it's wasn't too massively expensive. Was that you've got Romero and various members of his family are in this film. So you've got George A Romero himself is Father Howard, who makes the lovely comment about The Exorcist. He was just like, he's talking to Tata Kuda about about performing an exorcism, and he's like, "Oh, I've never done it myself," and he seems quite like a modern kind of hip happening priest guy.
He's way more interested in the wine. Yeah. He's like way more like, where does this wine come from? This is beautiful. It's good wine.
So he plays the priest who directs him towards the other priest who he reckons has done some of these sort of ancient rites and stuff, like the exorcism rites. The exorcism priest is actually George A. Romero's father-in-law.
No way, is it really?
Who is the father of Christina, the cousin in the house, who was George A. Romero's wife at the time.
No way.
Yes.
Well, I did not know that. There you go.
Yay! And during the wonderful stunt scenes at the end and stuff, when you've got all the pimps and the drug dealers and everything like that, that great scene where you've got the guy hitting the windscreen and rolling loads of times over the car, Tom Savini.
Of course.
Did all his own stunts and everything.
I have two stray observations from this movie as well that I just want to go out on before. Have you got any more interesting facts you want? One of the guys in that pimp shootout scene is wearing the most stunning pair of knee-high boots I've ever seen. They are exquisite.
If you saw his top half, you'd be like, he's just wearing regular shoes, and then
he's going to the baseball game. You know what I mean?
He's wearing like knee-high patent
they're
like
leather, red. They're like
boots,
like a deep, luscious ox blood
they're gorgeous.
colour.
Once you see them, you cannot unsee them. They're amazing. But...
And there are also, the other thing I have noted down, there are not one, not two, but 3 men seen sitting on the toilet reading newspapers at different parts in the film, one of whom seems to have his trousers up while he's sitting on the toilet.
He's just wanted a place to sit, you know.
Well, I was like, because that was right early on in the movie, and I was like, oh, is it implied that he killed that guy? Like he went and killed him afterwards? But no, he was just taking a dump in his trousers.
With his trousers up.
With his trousers up. Don't do that.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think that wraps us up for this week. So let's
loved it.
Yeah, totally loved it.
Really want to know your thoughts on it.
If you for some reason have managed to make it this far into the episode and thought, I've not seen this movie, I'd quite like to go see it. It's on YouTube. Just type in George A. Romero Martin, and there are about 3 or 4 different copies of it up there. And you can also, Kirsty.
Yes. If you go to tinyurl.com/behindthesofapodcast or go to Facebook and Instagram Behind the Sofa Podcast, I've actually put a link up so you can actually get the YouTube video is of Martin full length, is actually on our website as well, so you can watch it on there. At the same time, you can let us know what you think, so I'm excited, and I'm glad that we're now properly starting our horror movie education with films that neither of us have seen and that we're now really enjoying. So we are ready for next week. Are you ready for next week?
I'm so ready for next week.
Okay, so next week is Larry Cohen's 1976 movie God Told Me To. So the little bit that we've got about that is that there are a spate of murders, that there's a detective that's investigating it. Every single person who has committed one of these murders said that God told them to. And that's all we know.
So Larry Cohen is like a name I've heard mentioned echoing down the halls of horror. I don't think I've ever seen a Larry Cohen movie, because I know he wrote... I think he's more of a writer than a director.
He did The Stuff. That's the only one that I remember from where we were discussing it previously.
I think he also did It's Alive, which has an amazing front cover. But yeah, I'm so looking forward to this. And if you keep on with us on our social media, we can let you know where you can find copies of it to watch. I'm pretty sure there's also a full-length version of it up on YouTube, so if you don't feel like you want to go and rent it from Amazon or somewhere like that, you can definitely go get it from YouTube. Or if you wanted to buy it, Kirsty...
Yeah, if you wanted to buy it, then you can go to, again, tinyurl.com/behindthesofapodcast, which has got all of our episodes and where you can listen to them, but it also has our own horror movie store and horror bookstore. So any purchases that you make through those links there, that will take you straight to Amazon to where you can purchase it. Anything you buy, there'll be a little bit of a percentage of it which will go back to us. Won't cost you anything extra, but it will help us massively with putting the podcast together. So as a thank you in advance for that.
And make sure you go and give us a rate and subscribe on anywhere that you listen to the podcast. So SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. Just give us a thumbs up and a comment, and we'll talk to you. We're really nice. But I think that's it.
Yeah.
thanks very much. From behind the sofa, my name's Ollie.
And my name's Kirsty, and from behind the sofa, good night.
Oh, I really cocked up that ending.
Sorry.
Bye.